Did y'all finish the turkey? It is after Thanksgiving. I still have leftovers, but if you haven't, go warm up a plate of food and sit down and enjoy the dulcet tones of Ms. Berlin and myself on Breaking Down Security. I'm Brian Brake, of course. Ms. Berlin is here. Mr. Betcher, of course, has to make his excuses. He's at a family event. His daughter's doing basketball, so he won't be here this week. But welcome, Ms. Berlin.
Hey.
You
still have leftovers? It's been a week.
That's okay. I put them in the refrigerator. It's fine. That egg just looks a little green from the deviled eggs. It's all right, though.
Never mind.
It passes the sniff test. It's fine. It's fine.
Not afterwards. It's not gonna.
It's good. I see what you did there.
I was gonna let it go, and then you had to bring that up.
Yeah. You're not at Casa de Berlin. Where are you?
I am in a hotel in West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Hey, It's beautiful down here.
It's Secure West Virginia, isn't it?
It's Secure WV, aka HackerCon. I think one happens one day and one happens the next. I'm not quite sure on how they have the logistics for that.
Right on. You're in Mr. Gardner's part of the world right now.
Yeah. He's I think maybe an hour from here, his house.
Oh my hell. Okay. So what are you doing there?
I'm keynoting.
Oh wow.
I'm running another mental health village.
Oh, cool. My invite to Keynote must have been lost in the mail or something. I'm waiting for Bill to, make sure.
I was the second choice. They said that you never replied, so.
Were you the second choice?
Probably. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's all right. So.
I don't ask. I just say yes.
So you're doing like version 3 of your mental health village now. You've done it at Derby. You did it in Germany. Now you're on like version 3. So this is all like old hat for you now, Ian, yeah?
Yeah, I have everything packed in suitcases and tubs and stuff. And it's slowly amassing more stuff. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, it barely fit through my hotel room door.
Oh my God. Did you bring new paraphernalia or new things to this health village than you did at the other ones?
A couple things, yeah. The people at Dash Fest were nice enough to give me some money to replenish some of my stock.
Wow.
So I actually, I don't know. I don't remember if I mentioned on the podcast or not, but flying with slime is never a good idea. It kind of exploded in my luggage and got on everything.
Oh no. That's why you put everything in Ziploc bags.
It was in its own container and I thought it was fine and it was not. Pressure
change. It'll get you.
Yep, it just exploded and everything was covered in slime and I will never do that again. So no more slime ever at the health village. Never.
Well, if you're not
yourself, there's a concept out there. It's a thing. I'm not stalking it.
Well, if you're not going above 8,000 feet, you'd be fine.
Nope.
Okay.
We played with it at Derby, and it was a disaster there, too.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't play with the slime. My daughter makes it all the time here, and it just looks gross and smells worse.
I mean, it looks cool until you have to try and remove it from your hands.
Right on. Ugh. Okay. Yeah, I can't do that. Yeah, she enjoys making it and I'm like, okay, great. You've got, contact lens solution and like this clear glue and stuff. And I'm like, I don't even understand how it works, but yeah.
But I mean, the whole thing's kind of taken off. We have we're officially a company now.
Yay.
Yeah. We have a Patreon and we have people that I met at Dash Fest and Munich, like setting up our website and
oh, wow.
Whole bunch of stuff going on.
Very cool. There'll be a link in our show notes if you want to help support Ms. Berlin and the mental health hackers. That's what it's called, right? Mental health hackers?
It is,
yes. Yeah. LLC, limited liability company. Cool. So are either, I'm sorry, I said either of you, because we do have a guest this week. We will bring him in. When I first heard he was coming on the show or the topic that we're going to discuss, I was like, I don't even know how we're going to talk about this without it ended up being all like, Russians and interference and voting and stuff. But
I mean, there still will be those jokes.
Yeah. We're going to try to stick with facts. We're not a political podcast. Our Slack is not a political Slack, thankfully. So, are either one of you basketball fans? There's a setup here. Don't worry.
I mean, no.
Okay, good.
All right, more.
Okay, so that male voice you heard is Jeremy Mio, and he'll discuss why he is here. Please.
It's not because of basketball.
It's not because of basketball. No, Miss Berlin is had him tag along, and
I'm 5'3". Of course, I don't like basketball.
Well, what Spud Webb was what 5'6", 5'7", so you're not too short.
And I have bad knees as well, so I can't jump or run, or it's just a disaster.
All right. Well, Jeremy, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from.
I'm the Information Security Officer for Cuyahoga County. So that is the county government within the state of Ohio and the Cleveland area.
Okay.
So not too much of a basketball fan anymore.
Okay.
We lost.
Because of LeBron.
We lost.
Oh, you guys ruined my joke. I was going to say that Cuyahoga County is like Latin for LeBron doesn't want to live here anymore.
Oh,
no, close. So I run the Office of Security Research, which is within the Department of Information Technology, and we are in charge of security operations for all county agencies within certain limitations, and the Board of Elections is one of them.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Okay, so I don't know if anybody's been under a rock the last, month and a half, but there was, or 2 years, but there was some slight issues that people are perceiving happened with the elections that happened, and that's about as political as I'm going to get. But I know what I wanted to discuss, and since there's always been issues or talk in the news about how the press is stating that the election security is a big deal, I wanted to find somebody, and Ms. Berlin supplied somebody about how a state does its elections. And Jeremy is going to discuss with us tonight how Ohio, in at least this case, the state of Ohio, does its elections on. And so is this how every election works, or is this only specific types of elections?
So there are different ways elections work in different states. And I'm going to speak about how the state of Ohio works.
Right.
There are things called bottom-up states and top-down states. We are a bottom-up state, meaning that the county reports the election results up to the state.
Okay.
There are some that do that slightly different. I won't talk about those, but that's how the state of Ohio works. And we report up to the county, and the state has a whole separate operations and security behind the scenes, above and beyond of what we do. We are the largest county in the state of Ohio, and one of the top 30 largest in the nation.
Wow.
So we have a pretty significant, we provide significant resources for security operations for this, as we should, being one of the larger ones and trying to set the standard as well through the whole nation.
Okay. All right. So there's a before, a during, and an after process. So maybe we'll start with the pre-election process. Maybe we can discuss what you guys do to get ready for an election. What's the timeline like for this? Do you obviously it's not like tomorrow's we're going to have our election. It's probably weeks and months in advance prepping for this, I'd imagine.
Hey, Brian, can you mute your Slack?
Can I mute my Slack? Oh, son of a mother!
You're gonna drive all those people crazy.
Oh God!
They're gonna be thinking, I have a Slack alert. What's going on?
Everybody's reaching for their phones. Yeah.
All right, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Pre-election stuff.
Pre-election stuff. What's the timeline for getting ready for an election look like for you guys?
Right. So we, being the central, I would say, IT for the county, the Board of Elections does have their own IT department. We offer security services over top that, like we do a lot of the, I would say, non-executive agencies. So all I'm going to say is that the Board of Elections is its own entity. They happen to be centralized infrastructure under us. So we help out with certain things more than others. So they do a whole process of getting ready for every election months and months before any election. If that's a small municipality election to a midterm to even a presidential election, obviously, the larger the elections, the more time that they prepare.
Mm-hmm.
Our specific Board of Elections does multiple mock elections and testing of equipment throughout the whole year. They'll run a full mock election and they'll have the citizens involved, and people can volunteer for that. And there will be temporary poll workers. And it's also part of the whole training process for poll workers, as they are hired in temporarily for only certain parts of the time. They're not full staff.
Right.
So we, as being in the security operations, we're constantly doing things involved not only with the Board of Elections, but also with what the state of Ohio does. So one thing that we did this year, and it was something the state of Ohio did this year in partnership with DHS, was tabletop exercises. We do tabletop exercises. A lot of places do their own tabletop exercises, but this was a formalized tabletop exercise with every county in the entire state of Ohio. So that's 88 counties in the state of Ohio. What they did to do that from a logistics perspective was split each of the counties in 5 different areas. So they split every county into county north, county east, county west, county south, and county central. So the tabletop exercise would be in each central location throughout. And this happened months before the elections. And they went through all kinds of scenarios and awareness. And the nice thing about it was that the executives of the Board of Elections were required and recommended to be there, as well as the budgetary authority there as well, and the IT professional. So It kind of got all of those things, not just the IT guy or department or person, or sometimes some of them don't even have them and they're outsourced. So they had somebody there within an IT as well as the budget and the elections official there. So there were a lot of awareness happened there. It was very nice. There were a lot of things after that. And the state also offered a lot of resources, and Homeland Security, if you've seen in some of the news, more specific and focused, has offered a lot of services to counties and states as well. One of those things being the monitoring through Homeland Security and what are called ISACs. Mm-hmm. ISACs are information sharing and analysis centers.
Yep.
A lot of industries have specific ISACs, like the financial service industry, like banks, have the FS-ISAC, and state, local, tribal, and territory governments have something called the MS-ISAC, which stands for the multi-state ISAC. They created earlier this year something called the EI-ISAC, which is called the Elections Infrastructure ISAC, focusing on elections infrastructure and security monitoring and threats against that. Every county or elections jurisdiction in the entire nation is able to be a member there, and they get a slew of free services to the MS-ISAC and EI-ISAC, including forensic services, monthly calls. They get threat and certain types of reports like patch reports and all these kind of things. And when I say patch reports, like every application, they'll say when the new patch is and what the criticality is. Should you patch this? How is it affecting you? Things like that. Threats in the wild. And also they offer something which are called Albert sensors. Depending on the area that you're in, you might be able to get one for a cheaper or a potentially free rate. Albert sensors are intrusion detection systems on steroids that can plug into elections or county systems and then report back to DHS and as well as the EI-ISAC, which has a 24/7 security operations center. And then they can aggregate that data and analyze it and really see if there was a threat that, say, attacked from a certain IP block or range. They could see if that attacked all the state or county elections infrastructures within a matter of a lesser time than they would to go out to all of them and analyze that separately. The other thing pre-elections that the state of Ohio did was use the funding that was federally funded out there from DHS, as well as some of the other federal agencies that every state received, and they put it towards mandating that every county have a third-party security firm audit them based on best practices. The best practices they were chosen were these based on the CIS controls.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't familiar with the CIS controls. They were formerly the SANS top 20 critical controls, which kind of went back and forth between CIS and SANS for a while, created through the NSA and a lot of government-private partnerships. And they went above and beyond and created a handbook called Election Security Best Practices, and went through 88 best practices based on the CIS controls specifically for elections infrastructure, which covered things like the integrity of the voting machines, the application whitelisting of specific critical county infrastructure and things like that. A little more in depth than just saying, hey, go follow the critical controls. Good luck.
Right.
So it helped elections IT professionals kind of really see where to focus those controls at. And having a third-party security firm come in and do that helped a lot. And then report that all those things had to be reported up to the states.
Right. So, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ms. Berlin.
I could keep talking, so I'll.
So going back to the tabletop exercises, how, like, when those are done, so they're done through the entire state, if they find something that needs changed or added or whatever, how fast can you see that kind of stuff kind of trickle down?
So the tabletop exercise was, so when you have a formal tabletop exercise by like DHS or any third party firm that lasts 2 days or one full day, you usually bring your controls there, you bring your policies and procedures there, and when a scenario comes in or an inject comes in, you have to follow your procedures and see if your gaps. Mm-hmm. Because of the logistics of having every county jurisdiction bring in those things and have a I would say useful, productive time, what they did was they did a general scenario, and they actually gamified it. So what they did was everyone was given a role like you would in a tabletop. So you might actually not be in the IT role if you're the IT guy, but usually they tried to have that depending on who brought who to the table. And you went through and you were actually given, if you were either a county, a state, or just a county or a state, and then you were given like a point system, and then they went through this whole scenario, and you actually had to ask if you wanted to spend money on multi-factor authentication, or if you wanted malware endpoint protection and things like that. But the list was almost a black box. So you'd had to know to ask for those things, and the moderator that was going around had to actually see what those were on, if that was on the list, like, oh, I want patch management, or I want a password policy, things like that. We had to say those things. And then when the injects came in, like, there was a spear phishing attack, this, and this. If you already had your people, or you bought security awareness training, or you had security awareness training done with like your point system, then maybe you were unaffected by that inject, but then you still had to do a media response.
Right. And
then it might be media perception, and that you still have to report to the media regardless of what actually happened or not.
Sure.
You need to be fully transparent with the citizens and respond in an appropriate manner. So they kind of gamified it a little, because a lot of elections officials have never done a tabletop before.
Right.
Maybe some of the IT people have been involved in a tabletop, and maybe they have been in a tabletop once or twice, but it was not to that level at all.
Right.
So they kind of gamified it. And it was interesting. There were different rules around that, and there were a lot of things around that. And there were ways where you could, beat the game and things like that. But it was very productive. And I think that the elections officials really liked it. They got to understand it. It was at a high enough level where they could understand it, but also get that there's a budgetary impact, and they need to prioritize, do I get multi-factor or do I get security awareness training?
Yeah.
And why are those things important, and when are they important? So I think that was a really good thing that we did at the state. And in between this tabletop exercise, the tabletop exercise was only about 4 hours. And in between that, there were awareness things about supply chain management of like the storage devices and things like that throughout the kind of day-long conference / tabletop exercise that happened at the state and county level.
So Jeremy, I have a question. So you have 5 different county west, north, south, central, east. And so when they come in and they're doing the tabletops, and you're doing the prep for these, and you're talking about the CIS 20 controls. Are there any kind of vendor vetting or anything like that, or do you have people from County South coming in, going, well, you were using this that we bought from 1985 that we're using, and the company that makes it's gone, and County North's like, oh, we got these brand new fancy things that uses AI machine learning to help you vote better or whatever. Do you have a disparagement between technologies versus in different regions of your state, and how did you keep, if you don't, how did you keep the technology level equal across the state where everybody had a kind of on the equal footing?
So they tried to keep it very vendor agnostic, and just have the concepts and really focus the concepts into a lot of the elections officials, as well as the other elections administration that were there. These tabletops also happened over multiple different days, and some had multiple, like County West might have had 16 different sessions to get everyone in there. It might not have been one session where they were all in there, because again, it's 88 counties, bringing maybe 1 to 5 different people, and everyone's schedules don't align. And I know that there were, I wouldn't say makeup days, but there were some like, if you're in County Central and you missed it, come to County South and all these things. But when they went through the awareness, they tried to focus on the specific like voting machines that might have been used in that area. The whole state of Ohio is somewhat on one standard voting machine, but there are different models and things, and I can't really speak to all those because I don't work in all those counties. Sure. They tried to focus it, kind of by that. That's why they split it up like that, I believe. But again, all these tabletops were run through the state of Ohio Board of Elections, Secretary of State, as well as Homeland Security. So they prepared and kind of did this and went through. So it was I was essentially just a participant, and gave feedback afterwards.
Right. So was the state of Ohio special in this, or was every state getting some kind of training or something similar with DHS? Do you know?
I'm sure that every state was doing something to this matter. I am not aware of the specifics of other states or what they did, but I do know that Ohio was somewhat similar to Florida. So what was Ohio and Florida kind of stood out a little with some of the things that they were doing with the ISACs, and Ohio was lucky enough to have all 88 counties a member of that ISAC and be aware of that. And a lot of that technology discussion of, okay, what do we have? What can we have? What works better? Happens, I think, in the back ends once they're all part of that one community and that one ISAC, and there's a kind of more of a community portal to be able to discuss those things, especially on calls or separate calls, or to at least a central source that can give recommendations like that.
Cool. Okay. So for those of you who are following along with this, there's a slides that he has that he's actually showing us that he got as part of a meeting that he'd had. They're sanitized because there was some stuff that's for official use only, or stuff that us non-election folks aren't going to see. We are going to release some of this. There's going to be some cleanup as well, but we're going to have a link in the show notes to the slides so you can get an idea of what the timelines look like, and you can see what it takes to get to this level and to get to this level of understanding. So can we go back to slide 2 for the timeline? So this the slide I'm looking at is showing a rough timeline of what goes on with polling locations, states, and counties. So this is the election process. This is the deering, right? During election night?
Yes.
Okay. So who are the PEOs? What is that? Public enforcement officers?
So that's the primary elections officers.
Okay. Primary election officers.
Each polling location has essentially, and that's just internal That's internal, like kind of, and some counties might call them something else.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
It's internal nomenclature of just the person that opens the poll.
Right.
And has to be there. So there might be a tertiary person, secondary or tertiary person that can do that as well.
Okay. So, so assuming everything goes well, they show up at 5:30 a.m. Okay, we give them a half an hour to sleep in. Polls open at 6:30 a.m. Traditionally in Ohio, and they close at 7:30 p.m. This year, and like other states, depending on how you read the news, there were some issues with logistics. Like you had larger voter turnout, so obviously you ran out of some resources. So you have contingency plans for those things, right? If something happens where you run out of ballots or something like that, right? There's contingency plans in place for those kinds of things.
Yeah, so it's like
sticky notes. It's
all. we stay away from this. We put the passwords.
She's poking the tiger.
No,
she's poking the tiger.
We do not put passwords on sticky. Official for the record. So just like any business operations or forecasting, we have the Board of Elections, and this is outside my area, but that's in the administration part.
Right.
But they have to forecast how many ballots that they're going to have ready, because we are a paper ballot state and county. So we have to forecast how many we have there for cost efficiency, as well as we won't just print 100,000 if we only need 50,000. So there's forecasting that goes in. There's a lot that goes in behind that, and I know that in the county, historically, the average is about around 40% voter turnout for a midterm election.
Mm-hmm.
We pushed over 55%.
Goodness.
Voter turnout. So that's over a 15% increase. And as you could just imagine with any general forecasting, you're always going to be 5%, maybe over 10%. But once you start getting to 15, 20% over any type of forecasting, you start to run into potential issues.
Right.
So there are contingency plans for that. They went through that process, and everything ended up working out fine. But it's definitely, people could potentially had to wait for ballots to be available at certain locations. And I know that other places had a lot larger issues than we had, but at the end of the day, I believe that's a good issue to have from a voter turnout. Yep. I do know, and you could read this in the media, that some places had weather delays and logistics have where polling locations there
was like a freaking hurricane that came through.
Yeah, So a lot of some elections polling locations in the nation, not in Cuyahoga, had to stay open 2-3 hours after, and a lot of people from the citizen perspective might not think, okay, 7:30 is closed. Okay, they closed at 10:30 or something like that, maybe 11:30. But there's a whole back end process that has to happen. And people could be up till 5-6 a.m. doing things, and even longer.
Right. Okay. So polls close at 7:30. You guys have each polling place has a number of paper ballots,
voting machines as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and voting machines. Okay, so there's between the paper ballots. I'm assuming. Is that because you guys give them an option to, or the folks there give them an option to either use the booth or the paper? So
in Cuyahoga, there's you go in and you essentially sign in through the e-poll book. So there's there's electronic poll book. And from a contingency perspective, we still have paper backups just in case, but we do have a lot of efficiency gains with the ability just to scan an ID, and there's a lot of interoperability and security requirements across just the poll book, e-poll book infrastructure. But essentially, you go in, you get the your sign in, you pull in, and then you get a ballot. You go, and we actually get the write in. It's like the old school multiple choice, right? So you write in, and then you take your ballot. You hand it to the representative. They essentially take what is like almost like a receipt of that for record, and then you enter in the the paper ballot into the voting machine, and it's tallied.
Okay.
And then that's where the voting machine comes in, and then that paper ballot stored inside internally into the voting machine as well for source of record, and then you're voted.
Right.
And then at the end of the night, all these voting machines have storage devices inside of them that are at the end of the night collected.
Yeah. Okay. So I see the thumb drive there. You guys have that as it's not really. Is it really a thumb drive, or are you looking at hard drives or something? I mean, what gets counted? Is it the paper ballot, or is it the one that comes from the booth?
So,
because I'm assuming one covers the other. One is like non-repudiation. So it's like we can look at the ballot in the booth versus the paper ballot and go, okay, yes, they match. If you actually had to do some kind of error correction.
Correct. And the what's used as the first system of record is the storage device that's in there, which are electronically signed in for the voting machine. Right. That specific voting machine. Okay. And then the paper backup is there to be recounted if there's any type of integrity issue or potentially procedure that isn't followed with how the storage device is removed, and then
was all of
transferred.
That logged?
Yeah. So everything, there are tamper tapes, and there are numbers and serial numbers and things on every possible piece of the voting machine and storage device. And as those are going through, they have to be recorded, and there are kind of like a dual party kind of supervise over that is supposed to monitor that. And if there's any procedure not followed, or there is any error in the storage device, then the paper backups are used, and we have the voting machines would then be transferred to the central tabulation center and fully recounted in a super counter, which doesn't take very long at all.
And how are the memory devices transported? Are they put in a box with tamper seals?
The picture shows a little car.
Yeah, it's in a little car. Yeah, I was thinking like a Hot Wheels or something. You know, I'm assuming police vehicle if possible, or like Brinks armored truck. What are we talking about?
So
Jan from the library.
80-year-old grandma puts it in her purse next to her gum. You know, that kind of stuff. I apologize to 80-year-old grandmas. My 80-year-old grandma had gum all the time. That's why it brings up happy memories. I'm sorry.
So they are put in a essentially like a tamper-resistant evidence sealed bag. Okay. And then they are sealed with a lot of different procedures and policies there, and then escorted back to to the tabulation center. And there are procedures and how that happens. So it's essentially escorted with somebody that can see if it's tampered with at all.
So you're maintaining a chain of custody, a chain of evidence, if you will.
There's a chain of custody inside, as well as the machine itself logs when it's taken out, and then there's paper logs of that, as well as when the seal from the actual bag that is used as well has logs and stuff. So there's a whole chain of custody process that goes from the voting machine to the tabulation center.
And I assume that they're supposed to go from the polling location directly to the county center where all this is being done. They can't stop and go to McDonald's or something and pick up a Big Mac or something.
No, yes. So the not only do we collect the storage device, it's also important to collect the poll book at the same time. So we're collecting those devices. All of them have tracking on them, as well as the cars that are county vehicles that are required to transfer back all of that equipment. So that all of that is tracked and maintained and monitored in real time.
So you mean like GPS tracking?
Literally, yes.
Wow.
GPS tracking. Because there is a lot of deadline to get the uploads in certain increments to the state.
Right. Okay. So that makes sense.
It is a very interesting process to see. I recommend any citizen to sign up and either be a part of the elections process or even monitor or observe in whatever tabulation center or equivalent that you might have in your jurisdiction, because you can watch this process go and how they organize everything. And it's quite a sight.
Right.
When I first got involved with county operations, I came from the Fortune 500 industry. I've only been in local government operations for about 4.5-5 years. It was quite the interesting experience to see that the first time. And that was before the 2016 election.
Yeah.
But yeah, very interesting. And they're literally running around to get everything done in a very organized and formal fashion.
Organized chaos. Right. Okay.
Yep.
So after the stuff gets to, after, the guy drives from the polling location to the county or organization, and the election management system, they take it says they save the totals to a USB. I'm assuming it's a different USB stick.
Yeah. So this, again, this process I have up here is the general process for the whole state. So every county might have a slightly different process and what they do exactly. I mean, everything has to follow this, but it might be different nomenclature and things like that.
Yeah.
So ours gets, they get right when the USBs get, or the storage devices get transferred to the tabulation center, they're immediately scanned in. So it's actually a scan-in process. So it checks that it's actually been received and checked in as to be uploaded.
Okay.
And then they are organized in the tabulation center, which the tabulation center, if you sign up, you can actually observe that from a citizen perspective. And there's also a media room happening at the same time there. But the official tabulation individuals that do that have to be or two-party. So everything it takes 2 badges within a certain amount of time to even get into the tabulation center, and as well as 2 passwords to access any system within the tabulation center as well. And
Nice.
That's a Republican as well as the Democratic, multi-party system there, which is essentially credential partitioning across to make sure that no one person can kind of get through anything. As they're kind of in the queue to get uploaded, they're essentially plugged into, we have a few machines that are connected to the election management system database. All of these systems are offline. They're certified offline, as well as refreshed every election and upgraded when needed.
Right.
So they won't even, connect to the internet for a while to get Windows updates or anything. The whole system essentially is refreshed. And then those are uploaded, tabulated. There's a program that obviously is tabulating all the digitally signed USB drives. And then once those are all done, there are USB drives that the state sends us that are certified only for one-time use, that have been through also supply chain, security review and things like that. And there are one-time use then transferred to the reporting system as well as the upload system. And those are essentially entered into a write blocker as well.
Right.
When they're entered into the system. So there's 2 systems that they're entered into. One is the reporting system that the county has that then gets uploaded to the county website as the unofficial results. And the other one is sent and securely uploaded directly to the state system. And that is connected to the network, but not connected to the any type of public or internet. It's essentially a VPN directly to the state system.
Yeah, I didn't know how.
And our state system is all internal, so it's our internal WAN.
Okay.
It's VPNing through.
Yeah, I didn't know how technical we wanted to get down into to the communications and stuff. Because what your slide here on slide 2, the election night reporting system, or ENR, it says is connected to the internet. You called that out specifically because I was like, because my thought was like, oh, okay, well, at what point are we connected to the internet in this polling process?
That ENR system right there, the election night reporting system, I mean, that machine itself is then connected to like a private DMZ that then gets posted up through a systematic call through a multi-tiered, DMZ. So it's not like it just gets thrown up to our WordPress site or something like that.
But the election management system you've got there on the far right is completely isolated, no internet connectivity. So what happens to the paper copies at the polling locations? Because I'm thinking if I wanted to taint an election, I would make it. I wouldn't attack necessarily the computer system, but I would make it look like the computer system got it wrong by maybe modifying the paper ballots.
Oh, that's an interesting scenario. So when the storage devices as well as the poll books, the voting machines are also in the same transportation are transported to the tabulation center.
Okay.
At the same time. And the paper backups are inside the voting machine, and there's integrity systems and security in place for that. And it is stored at the tabulation center in a separate caged facility because there are post-election audits that are required. Right. So they do check to see if an audible amount of votes are correct to the electronic storage devices.
Okay, so the thumb drives are stored in a separate location from the paper ballots. Yep. And when you guys finally consider it official, do you take those thumb drives and papers and take them to Iron Mountain and just, take the hammer to the thumb drives and take the incinerator to the paper ballots?
So there is actually a retention requirement for each Board of Elections and by the states as well as potentially the county itself, and they keep them for potentially indefinite amounts of time.
You'd think it would just be like until the term's up because it doesn't matter anymore.
There are some things that do, especially when like petitions or certain types of issues.
Right.
And that might just be public record at some point to see the statistics and things. And some things are stored and it gets into the internal Board of Elections operations that I honestly am not that familiar with the specific retentions amount of each different election. But I do know that they keep them until fully audits and terms are over. In some cases,
right? Okay.
And there's a whole retention period that or retention schedule that is public record that you could view, and it's usually viewed directly on the Board of Elections website.
Sure, and I'm sure FOIA requests you could actually look at the ballots if you wanted to, or look at the process, and get walked through it.
There are things that you can look at through the FOIA request, and there are limitations, obviously, for privacy about who voted for what, things like that, and. But there are general statistics that are constantly requested.
Right. And sorry for non-U.S. people, FOIA is a Freedom of Information Act, so it's how we go about getting access to records that aren't necessarily public but can be released to the public. So, all right. So, okay, so election night is over. Everything's been tallied. Paper's been put in the proper cage. Thumb drives have been put in the proper cages. They can only be used once. So this last election,
those are then destroyed.
The thumb drives are destroyed.
The thumb drives that do the transfer. So think of that as one-use transfer. So they're just copying in, and there are essentially a few, like a half dozen times that you have to report to the state as you're going through the hundreds. We have thousands of storage devices, USB drives that go through that. And through certain amount of time frame, we upload it in batches, essentially.
Right.
I mean, it's not in batches, but you get the picture of incrementally uploaded, and then those are then destroyed.
And I'm assuming
afterward.
the integrity portion between the polling and the county and the uploading, there's some checksumming, there's some comparing to make sure that the data on the thumb drive has not been modified in any way, shape, or form.
There are processes and there's procedures in place to check that.
Yeah. So the threat modeler, the threat assessment person in me is thinking like, well, there might be firmware, bad firmware on the thumb drive or something like that.
Yeah, I can speak on the state of Ohio has I'm going to call them a work group that assesses the USB drives that are used to do the transfers.
Okay.
And that's why they're sent by the state.
Right.
So each county has to use those, as well as using a write blocker on the upload system as well.
Nice.
So there's nothing written back to it in any way. It's only a full read. And just the storage devices that are used on all these voting machines are by the actual manufacturer of the voting machines. They're not just random storage devices. They are certified, specially made storage devices that are through the USB, but they're not just USB sticks.
Right. Okay. So I don't mean to go back to the polling stuff, but the booths. Okay. So for those of you who follow what was going on at Black Hat and DEF CON, they had a voting village, and I'm not going to judge either way. But some of the news articles were 11-year-old cracks, the election, the election booths, or able to hack the election booths or what have you. And there were some other things going on, like they taught all the kids how to do SQL injection, and there were some other things going on there. It was effective in showing the software is not very up to date or very, possibly accurate, in that manner. How easy would it be, in your opinion, as somebody who's been doing this for a few years, would it be to gain access to a polling booth to be able to do the types of attacks that were highlighted at Black Hat? Or was it or was it DEF CON? DEF CON. I'm sorry, DEF CON.
I can speak on not behalf of my official duty as a county,
right,
and as a participant and personal goer of DEF CON myself.
Okay.
And some of the things, realistically, they cut a lot of the full systems weren't there for good reason, because you can't set them all up and it wouldn't be a productive show, or I would say almost like CTF or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It is not easy to do these things, not only because of how they're set up, but there are a lot of internal knowledge that you have to gain, and information to know that maybe people now are starting to know because they're really looking at some, but you might know it for one county, might be different to another county, that might be different to a different state. I know that we're one of the larger counties.
Mm-hmm.
It would be very difficult, I believe, to do that. We have multiple levels of defense in depth,
and none of those are networks. Like if you did want to do the one thing, maybe you get the information that's on that one device.
Right. Well, and just to be clear, at the stuff at DEF CON that happened, none of it was set up fully that used an election management system. There was not an election management system used as the offline tabulation center. It was all direct election night reporting systems, as well as the voting systems that they used and hacked into were running an election management system on the voting machine itself. Okay. So when they changed the votes on the device because it was one central thing. That would be like putting your entire DMZ infrastructure on one server and saying that you could change the database because you got into the front end CMS.
It's like running a whole LAMP stack instead of separating the web server and the database and the app server. It was all running on one device. So if you own one part, you're going to own the whole thing.
Right. And no county or state runs their election management system on the voting machine itself.
Okay.
Now, the reason I believe that the system that they used, again, because it was an older system, it was used for testing. So you could run an election management system to just do some testing to make sure that your precinct data that you put in and the votes that you did were just they were what you thought they were. And that was a pure testing functionality that those had, from my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Someone correct me if I'm wrong in the Slack or somewhere else.
You just yell at him on Twitter.
Was it running in some kind of debug mode, perhaps? Or you said it was
I don't
used
believe
for
it
testing.
was. It wasn't a debug mode. It was running as a regular mode, and you can do that. I know that the specific systems that were used there were not the up to date to the systems that we use at our county.
Okay.
And a lot of counties, there are a lot of old machines that were used there.
Yeah.
I believe maybe few of the machines might have been used in some counties in places in the U.S., but not the ones that the specific person, the 11-year-old, was actually using. So some of the systems that were at DEF CON were from literally I think the 90s, 80s, 90s. Yeah. Which is fine because, again, understanding that stuff and doing that stuff, I love the voting hacking village there. I spent a lot of time there. I spent a lot of time also at the Blue Team village, was also amazing. And I think it was great. I think it brought something that needs to be brought to attention. I do think that some things were focused that might have been maybe misperceived and just unknown and unaware to the media, because at the end of the day, a lot of people don't understand how IT infrastructure and things work,
right?
And they know that hacking happens, and they know it happens every day.
So could it have been argued that this was a lot like jackpotting ATMs or car hacking, where it was kind of stun hacking kind of stuff?
I would say it's similar to that. Yeah. I do think that there are probably attack chains that could happen.
Sure.
That I think that would be very significant, that are definitely viable. And I think we're now to the point where we're at least looking at things like that.
Right.
Just like any critical system.
Yeah.
I mean, systems like election systems are just as critical as our 911 and our EMS systems and our police and fire systems.
Yeah.
Those go under the same scrutiny as other critical infrastructure. So I think it's great that DHS now also considers this a critical infrastructure as well, because that gives a lot more capabilities and funding to the systems and to protect them. Because a lot of these counties, I say that for our county that it has a lot of defense in depth. Some counties, not only in their board of elections, but in their general operations, might not even have an IT department.
Yeah.
Right. So you're dealing with people that have very, very low budget, and they're on a fixed, if they're funded by income tax or they're funded by property tax, that's usually somewhat fixed rate. These aren't private businesses that are getting, more and more funding every year.
Right. So I'm bouncing back and forth, and I apologize for this. So going back to the polling locations, the polls and the ballot boxes and the machines that are actually used for voting, what kind of security controls are in place for those? Because you said that the hacking village had booths that people would be voting in, and okay, that's great, but the other 200 some odd days of the year when polling isn't happening, where are those stored? Are they because this is what I would assume the equivalent of ComSec gear when I was in the Navy. Those got stored in secure locations. It required people to get to them of a specific type of security clearance. So how are voting booths where people take their paper ballots into, where are those stored when there's not elections happening, and when they're set up the night before? Because obviously there has to be some staging. Who monitors those or makes sure that they're not being tampered with before the election starts?
So the state, from my understanding, every state, I know the state of Ohio,
right.
The Secretary of State mandates how a lot of these general operations have to go, and where you have to store these in climate controlled facilities, how they have to go. And they give guidelines and frameworks and mandates of how things have to happen. Mm-hmm. There's an entire, essentially, elections handbook and operations guide that is hundreds of pages long that the state requires every county, and that's public. You can look at those, and from every state you can look at those general guidelines of what they do. Our tabulation center is the secured facility. It's a very large facility. It has different secured components within that facility. So the voting machines are stored at those secured facilities within those components and hardened areas. They're also baselined and refreshed, and then essentially maintain the integrity with tamper-resistant seals and monitoring. And at the county level, within our county, the county sheriff does have physical security operations around that. We have our camera and facility access system that's over there and has different access controls and things like that. That is at that facility. So it's it's a hardened facility. It's also, though, certain times available to the public. So that's why there are certain hardened components within that.
Right.
And during the before, during, and after elections, we do constant walkthroughs. I kind of talked about some of the pre-election stuff when I said the third-party risk assessments, and we did that. So we had a third-party risk assessment come through, and they also assessed general physical security logistics as well. And that was one of the things that are reviewed in those best practices.
Yeah. So is it an independent third party looking at this, or are you hiring like a PricewaterhouseCoopers, some lawyer firm that monitors or audits for these kinds of things, or is it state officials only? There
are a few different through the state within this specific instance that they wanted you to go towards people, obviously, that are qualified. I'm sure some of the larger counties go with some of the big four or something like that,
right?
With the budgetary limitations that do exist. We went with a specific security pen testing company that's focuses not in all types of Fortune 50 and and potentially military contracting and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
That we had available there.
Okay.
So we were somewhat lucky to have those contacts and them available for that, and have the budgetary items to be able to go towards and get them to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I'm running out of things to talk about. I think we've gotten the majority of the things that are on our list here. Is there anything else that you'd like to go over or discuss before we end the show?
So some of the things I wanted to touch on is that we do on-site we have a 24/7 SOC, Security Operations Center, but we're on site for the whole elections operations all the way until they're done counting and tabulating, and that could be up to 2 a.m. And we're sitting there and essentially doing threat hunting on specific systems, making sure things are happening. Some of it's administrative policy, making sure that that's happening. We might be looking for anomalous activity. We're also doing a lot of analysis within just the general airwaves and things like that to see if there's any type of attempt of malicious use within the capabilities that we have, and also interoperating with other intelligence agencies as well as other counties. And this is one of the first years. This is the first year that the EI-ISAC, the elections infrastructure ISAC, has been available to serve as that central focal point from every county in the nation and state to be able to quickly share intelligence if this IP block is scanning us or it's scanning you. Oh, we're getting this interesting uploads to these forms that aren't on the election site, but they're on our fiscal website, and it's just odd that we haven't seen before. Are you guys seeing these as well? So it was very fluid than it was ever before in my experience. But again, I have only been involved in the past 5 years, but I think these 5 years have been the most kind of security aware elections than we've ever had before.
That's cool. Yeah. So I know Miss Berlin works for a security provider. Are there? So it seems like especially with the ISAC or with sharing, and we've had somebody on who's worked for like the retail ISAC, and has talked about sharing the information there. The retail ISAC or one of the other ones, it's probably a little bit of information over a long period of time, whereas I would imagine the election-based stuff would be like trickle. Couple weeks before the election, you see the information start to ramp up, and then like the night of, everything that you're going to get in would probably be like, it needs immediate action, stop everything you're doing and block these IP addresses. Am I right on how the tempo works on this?
I feel like it's probably like that with finances too around tax time.
Right.
Yeah. The EI-ISAC does a lot of things. So throughout the whole year, they're actually active as well. So they're doing monthly calls and seeing what's attacking certain infrastructure. And since they're connected to the MS-ISAC, they're also using the data and analysis for all just general local government, like intelligence, cybersecurity intelligence. But the nice thing that the EI-ISAC that did a little differently that they have that I haven't seen other ISACs do, and other ISACs could do this, is that even during the year, non-election time, they're actually emailing awareness materials like newsletters and just general news directly to the elections directors and officials that are on whatever you've denoted as your election management staff or officials or whoever you want to get those emails,
right? Which
is nice because they do that as their service, and you might have your own internal security awareness campaign and things that you send too. But if it comes from them, it's just another thing that you don't either have to worry about, or at least it's being done at a baseline level for you. So those are some of the things that they do, and they do constant webcasts and other types of just events and things like that throughout the year, a non-election time frame.
Yeah.
So that's also a nice thing. And they offer services, and the governmental ISACs are a little bit different because they get a lot of funding, and we can literally have them do services, and they're also completely free of charge.
Okay. So my question is why, so if you guys are monitoring for IPs from, I don't know, other countries, why are you not blocking anything outside of the US from coming in?
So we have a lot of geo restrictions.
Okay. All right.
Some counties do, but even as us, which is very interesting, we have to be very careful in some of them because we have people that are military and overseas that do email and do vote through the military overseas voting, and they have to email, and they have to connect to our website to view when they can mail in or whatever they have to do to get their ballot and vote counted.
Right.
Even if that's just informational things.
Okay.
We have to be careful on some of our geo restrictions so that they can still do that. So no matter where they're at. Now, obviously, there are some places that even if there are military personnel, we can still completely block those because they VPN or they access through the governmental systems to get whatever they need in the U.S. base. But we do have a lot of geo restrictions. You can imagine there are certain countries, especially that are certain countries in the news that we are completely geo blocked.
That makes sense.
But we still look at the IP analysis, even at the geo blocks, to see which ones we're getting blocked from, just to have the intelligence of seeing, is there a targeted attack, even if it's getting completely blocked. So that's the level of analysis that we looked at this election, just to see more of the intelligence and understanding of the elections night and what's hitting our systems, even if it's getting blocked.
That makes sense.
Because a lot of the threat intelligence that was being shared was completely being denied by everyone's security controls and things like that, especially some things going against, RDP kind of shotgun out, trying to get an RDP systems and things like that we've seen. Yeah,
and I mean, it doesn't take much for you to open up a US West, AWS instance and proxy your traffic through that. So it would look like it would come through a legitimate US based IP address. So I get it. Not all geo blocking is useful, or even Tor nodes. If people were using Tor nodes to get through, there's still ways to get around IP blocking. Right on.
But it's definitely not you should still have it in place if you can have it in place.
Yeah. Gets that low hanging fruit. Sure. All right. So let me see. Was there anything else? There's slide 8 and 9. Those may not exist when we release this, but was that?
Yeah. So Some of the stuff talks about specifically what was seen, and most of the stuff is all public here about a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of interesting news around spoof text messages coming out just saying where polling locations were or weren't, or social media communicating false polling locations. And some of those they didn't happen in our era, but they were reported to and you could see in the news that they happened. And some of them were just, I think, just everyone's looking at it at a magnified level, that it might have been someone literally just saw that was incorrect, and it was a maybe voting advocacy center that was literally just had the wrong time for something.
Right.
And it's there were foreign scanning, and you'll see that in the news, and certain types of there are a lot of things like scanning methods and brute force attempts against emails. And I think a large thing that a lot of people are looking at is the Office 365 and email accounts, and making sure even though it's not a critical elections directly connected election system, but it's definitely within elections administration, and it's definitely a chain of attack there, and a lot of things that you can get from that, and a lot of things that you can send out if you spoof or send out from an elections official email address and things like that. Right. I think that those are going to be the things that we're going to start even now being able to look at, just general basic hygiene and security practices that any industry organization should be following.
Right. Okay. So, wow, that was pretty awesome. I appreciate the physical aspects of this, the chain of custody, and making sure that, everything is being managed in that way. I can completely understand the situational reports. These situational reports, they happen semi-regularly, or are they more important on days of the when there's elections happening, or do you guys do situational reports like regularly, like monthly or something?
So the ISAC does situational reports and monthly calls every month.
Okay.
Monthly calls.
Right.
Double monthly. And they share a lot of intelligence and general, maybe a use case and things like that. So they'll go a little more in depth than just a situational report, but they'll cover that in the first 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
But then during the elections operations, at least this elections, they did, every few hours, they did a full situational report to summarize all the things coming in. Some of them were, I would say, informational, but nice to know. And they did that because and they actually started that, days and days before the elections and went through until post-election, depending on how certain states and things did their logistics. So it was very interesting to be able to kind of see that and share that and see a summary of what happened and what were the high-level things, because there's a lot of information going back and forth, and really you only need to know at any given time just the top things that are happening at any given time.
So when you get the situational reports, is it based on your state, or do you get like a wider view, like, Wyoming is, on track to be correct, and I don't want to disparage any specific state, but
I mean, you already threw Wyoming under the bus. So.
No, well, I tried to give them positives, but were there other readings from other states that maybe they're a little behind, and this is what they're going to need to get ready, or is it just Ohio only?
So no, it was the situation reports are nationwide.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's a situation report of every of any high levels from the whole nation.
Wow.
So you could have any state and stuff within that situation. Depending on what the intelligence is, it might only say states or elections locations in state X, right?
Yeah.
But at the monthly call level, since the elections ISAC as well as MS ISAC are kind of combined, it goes through not only elections, but also city, state, tribal, territorial, and public education.
Okay. So
and then it goes also down into I would say like sub-political divisions, but like a sewer district and things like that, they kind of put in a separate bucket.
Okay.
Or like some type of public electric utilities and things like that.
Yeah.
So they go through the situation report of the entire nation, and that could be, at any given month, an analysis of over hundreds of petabytes of information.
Right. Yeah, and I would imagine they would keep track of certain states where there might be some chance of a change in political affiliations or whatever, important ones that might cause like swing states or what have you to.
And every state has a specific threat level that's shared up to the DHS, and they can change that. Certain people can change that threat level. So you could look in a separate portal of what every state is, and during elections time frame, you can see that it's obviously election specific, but that's just always generally the threat level of every state.
Okay, cool, awesome. I don't have anything else, and it's 11 o'clock, and I've probably harshed Miss Berlin's buzz, so I think
it's all gone now. It's all right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you're keynoting tomorrow, so you need to go to bed anyway.
I know.
All right. Well, Jeremy, I got to tell you, I didn't know what to expect when we first started this, and this doesn't happen often because, I'm usually better prepared, but we didn't have any notes for this when we first started. I just heard election security, and I'm like, what are we going to be talking about? So, but this is one of those ones I'm glad we had, because I don't think a lot of people really understand the whole election at least in the state of Ohio. If you're listening from the state of Ohio, you're going to get a better idea and understanding of how it works, at least in your state. I myself here in the state of Washington, we're so technologically advanced. I just, voted with my cranial implant. So, using the
Tesla voted for you.
My Tesla voted for me using tachyon based, voting streams and stuff. It's very high tech. I can't, take the time to explain it, but, I think we voted with a mail ballot.
That didn't sound pretentious at all.
No, we're so technologically advanced over here. Our coffee-based voting systems, we just toss coffee beans into hats and stuff and vote that way. Yeah. We're sole sourced voting systems. No, I'm kidding. I think we did a mail-in ballot, so that it's fairly low tech over here.
I always vote the early stuff because I don't have to online.
Yeah, I don't even know where to go vote at over in these places, so it's just easier to do a mail-in ballot for us. So
if you go to your local Board of Elections website, that's where your polling location will be right there. As long as you can enter it right there, and I'm sure that it will direct you directly to your tachyon-based voting polling pod.
Cool.
And if you look it up from your Tesla, it'll just drag you there.
There you go.
Probably could just tell it to go polling location. It already knows.
I'm sorry, Brian. I can't go there. Yeah. No, I'm sure it's at one of the elementary schools or something. If they were open that day. So cool. So if people wanted to discuss election security in a well-mannered and rational way, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to discuss?
Well, I believe I am on the Brakesec Slack.
You are?
Really? I might have been invited per a link and then maybe never clicked on it, but I was invited. So I will now be potentially re-invited. I'll be on the Brakesec Slack. And
you're on Twitter.
I am on Twitter.
Okay.
And I also
just give them all your cell phone numbers.
I also very much advocate anyone getting involved in their local jurisdiction as well as you're listening to Brakesec podcast, then
you promoting it now doesn't help because they're already listening.
Well, I'm saying if they're involved, they're probably an IT security professional, and they should get involved. Go to the public meetings. The Board of Elections usually always have public meetings where they discuss the election results, issues with certain IT infrastructure, all publicly talked about in the either monthly or quarterly meetings that they have, and they do listen to people, and they need more people involved. When we did our e-polling, with our electronic polling system, we had public meetings about security, and we had people come from the universities, and we had people come from all over and talk about and understand the security and demoing, and we had citizens demo the products So we didn't just pick some random sole source product, and went through a proper review. And I advocate anyone get involved with your local jurisdiction, because they'd probably love to have you help out or review or look at anything there.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you can do that as for volunteer work if you're interested in volunteering for those things. So Ms. Berlin's typing in her Jeremy's Twitter handle. It's at Cyborg00101. Yes, Cyborg zeros.
You can look up the hashtag DEF CON. What was our hashtag for? He was one of the two people on my road trip with me to DEF CON.
Oh wow, okay. Were you taking the video of the burning semi or whatever going down the interstate?
That was me.
I was driving.
He was driving.
Like a responsible
and I was
person.
I was yelling at him to drive faster.
That's that. I'm not surprised she was yelling at you to drive faster. She, if it ain't the speed of light or, some increment of C, then she's. You
don't know. You've never driven with me.
Speed up, you young punks. I'm trying to get to DEF CON. Anyway, so Cyborg00101 on Twitter. It'll be in the show notes if you need to find it. And I'm very happy about how this went. I'm almost interested in trying to get involved in my local election process. So, that's great. Are you speaking at Secure West Virginia, or you drove Miss Berlin there? What happened?
Oh no, I drove myself.
Oh,
Very strong, independent woman.
I'm a strong
woman. Word.
I am teaching a workshop on automated incident response.
Oh, very nice. Well,
the 3-hour workshop. We hope to get as much done as possible, but I wish I had
ready?
more time. I am ready. But there's only so much you can do in 3 hours.
Okay. By the time people hear this will all be over and you'll be back home anyway. But are you planning on giving this workshop anywhere else?
Well, this is the first time I'm giving the workshop. I submitted as a talk, and Secure West Virginia contacted me and said, "Hey, can you give us a workshop?" And I said, "Define what you think a workshop is, because it's a month before the conference, and I don't have labs and things like that set up.
Right.
I could have a hands-off kind of group activity workshop around automated incident response and demoed systems that people can see and see the concepts and things work, and that's what we're doing."
What happened was he was going to give you a 20-minute slot, and you had 300 slides, so he was like, "Oh, let's just turn this into a 3-hour workshop."
So I might give this workshop again, or maybe I really want to be involved with something like the Blue Team Village at DEF CON had, where they had the essentially a lot of the infrastructure set up and real time, looking at some of the things coming through and modifying things and seeing things, because I think that's amazing. I think that's some of the best things a conference can have is hands-on workshops like that are just ongoing villages, a little different than the traditional CTFs, because I think having a Blue Team Village was amazing there, especially at a place like DEF CON where you have a lot of offensive security professionals and people like that there. It was great.
Right. Well, I think, is B-Sides Nashville still needing CFP?
Yep.
So maybe you could submit to B-Sides Nashville, not as a workshop, but maybe as a talk, and see what happens. Definitely, especially if there's a spot open if they don't get many submissions. Cool. There you go. All right. So we're gonna end on that note. Ms. Berlin, if people wanted to get a hold of you to talk about mental health hackers. I'm going to get that right. Work. God's this Q4, man. Anyway, how would they get a hold of you if they wanted to talk about mental health hackers or the village you're doing, or if they wanted to have you come and do the village at their con?
So a bunch of different ways. So my Twitter is InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR.
I didn't ask you about that. I asked you about the other things. I didn't ask you about Twitter. You jumped the gun.
But you can still, that's the one I pay attention to the most.
Okay.
Slack works, or we also have, we don't have a website up yet, but you can email me at Amanda@mentalhealthhackers.org, or our new Twitter is Hackers Health.
Goodness. Hackers Health. Okay, cool. I will. I already follow that on Brakesec. How?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I don't follow.
And our Patreon's up finally as of yesterday. It's now been up for 24 hours.
Okay.
And we have a few subscribers already to help us pay our bills, so I don't have to pay for everything. Would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can definitely talk about what the Patreon will go to support on a future podcast. That way people can get an understanding of where, what you're doing with that and what the money's going to go to. So for full transparency purposes. We're going
to be at B-Sides Las Vegas.
Oh, very cool. And next year.
Hopefully if we get enough money from sponsors, we'll have chair massages the entire time B-Sides Las Vegas is going on.
Nice. I told you I wanted to be volunteer number 0 for that. So, put me down. So, Santa Summer, Hacker Santa, you're still accepting names until December 1st, right?
I am sending out matches on Saturday.
Saturday. Okay. Well, this podcast is going to go out on Sunday. So if you didn't sign up, you're too damn late. So my bad.
Yeah. I mean, last year I did have people sign up afterwards, but you're not guaranteed to get signed up afterwards just because I'm already up almost to 400 people.
Sweet Lord.
20 countries.
Oh my hell. That's a 200% better than you did last year, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very nice. Okay. So everyone else is doing cool stuff except for me, but Mr. Betcher, he also has an application called LogMD if you are interested in finding out how to do some automated logging and use that maybe in Jeremy's automated incident response class because, it configures Windows so that you can get better logs from your systems. You can find him at Log-MD. And Malware Archaeology, him and Michael Goff. Also, there's a Breaking It Down Incident Response podcast if you're interested in listening to that. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to Malware Archaeology and find the Breaking Down Incident Response podcast there as well. They talk about a lot of incident response-based items. Logging specifically, or how to make your SIM do things for you and do better on that. So. Let me see. Brakesec podcast is at Brakesec, Brakesec. You can follow me on Twitter, BryanBrake, Brian Brake. We have a Slack, very active. I just gave out metrics to people. We have around 400 active users per day. We have 340,000 messages in our Slack that we're trying to figure out how we're going to allow people to have access to that massive amount of messages. I was just told that if I become a 501c3 that I get a huge discount on Slack if I wanted to pay for it. I'm not sure I want to do that yet.
You get a lot of discounts on a lot of stuff if you can become one.
I know.
We're almost there.
I've got so much shite that I got to work on. There goes the explicit tag. And so, yeah, if you're interested in joining the Slack, you can send us a DM on Brakesec on Twitter or email bds.podcast@gmail.com. So that's it. Our podcasts, we're working on having podcasts all the way out until mid-December. This was just one of the ones that we had set up. Please come back next week. I'm hoping that some Node.js stuff will be figuring prominently. I know I jinxed it, but I've got more than one email from the guy we're going to interview next week talking about it, so I'm hoping that means it's legit. Ms. Berlin, safe travels home. Jeremy, thank you for coming on the show. If you have any other topics from a state or a government level, I would love for you to come on and talk about those because your knowledge is more than just election security. So if you've got some government-based topics you'd like to have come on, we'd love to have you on. What was that? You're just like...
I said Andy talks a lot, so...
At a lot of conferences.
No, I just meant in general.
Oh, thanks.
She's talking about you, but she's also talking about me. So, yeah. All right.
I felt like I didn't talk much this entire time.
Well, it's okay. I mean, you did 50% of the work. You brought the guest. So that's cool.
I did. You're right.
That's important, So go enjoy your keynote, Ms. Berlin. Tell us how everything did next week. And Jeremy, yes, like I said, feel free to join our Slack and come on again if you would love to, because I thought this was a very interesting topic. So, That's it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week. Be nice to one another. Take care of yourself because you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.